better one.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to call the March 29th, 2018 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order. Can we all please stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Have any announcements? Is there anybody here for anything that's not currently on our agenda? Seeing as no, I'd like to start with asking Mr. DeCaro to come up for our community host agreement for medicinal alternatives and a proposed zoning bylaw amendment and possible votes. How you doing,
Members
Peter?
of the board, Chairman, thank you for having me this evening.
Good evening.
Appreciate it.
So, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed, we had a meeting and discussion with Mr. DeCaro and have worked out an additional host agreement allowing medical alternatives to, along with cultivating medicinal marijuana, also I believe you call it adult use or recreational use on a grow side. So, and as Matt alluded to, proposing zoning bylaw amendments.
So where you ended up, your moratorium is a zoning bylaw, and you amended that at your last town meeting. So you have to follow the process for amending a zoning bylaw on annual town meeting. That would require consideration of the language tonight and a referral of the language to the planning board for public hearing. Public hearing will require their advertisement, so really you're kind of shooting at April 24th would be when the planning board was able to get it. And then they would submit their report to town meeting the night of town meeting on the floor in order to anticipate a possible vote on the bylaw change. That bylaw change would, if adopted as written here, would allow for Mr. DeCaro's planned activity without violating the moratorium. The language suggested here in the packet, Mr. Cundiff took a swing at this. When engineers write legal documents, you get the same words 3 times over, but sometimes it helps. Basically, it carves the definition of cultivator out of the coverage of the moratorium. But all of the other recreational marijuana uses outlined in the new regs would still be under the moratorium through December 30th of this year. But the cultivating activity requested by the party in interest would be allowed. It's not a difficult edit, it's just that he made the change everywhere he saw it, which I actually think is safe. There's no internal contradiction in the language.
All right.
Peter,
What's the purpose of the delay
what delay?
to the December 31st mark?
Well, it was January 1st.
Yeah.
He just moved it back a day to make it, a new year is a new regime. He just cleaned it up.
Okay, so
It's 1 day earlier that it ends.
but not 6 months earlier, the recreational, permitting that.
No, so instead of changing the day the moratorium ends, he's taken the definition of cultivator out
Okay.
of the coverage of the moratorium. So in other words, the regs list all of the activities contemplated for recreational marijuana. Testing laboratory, grow, retail, and all those separate line items were covered by your moratorium. The language suggested, because it's a little bit easier than changing the date, is to take you've already thought about what a cultivator does. Cultivator will no longer be part of the moratorium at all, but the town still has the rest of this calendar year to think about zoning changes for a more comprehensive approach to recreational marijuana.
Understood.
If you move the date up, then we would have only until June to figure all those issues out, which based on the pace of work on the budget and all the other items that we have to deal with, we're just not going to get to it by June.
So the only question I have regarding this would be for any type of manufacturing. So will we be able to execute the agreement that would allow us to cultivate and manufacture? Because that's really ultimately all we're seeking, is the ability to do that. So the cultivator piece, excluding that from the moratorium, that's fine, but the manufacturing would also be a secondary piece to that. And as you know, this conversation has nothing to do with any interest to pursue retail or what have you. That's completely separate. So this is purely just
So under the Cannabis Control Commission's regs, have they separated out the drying and all of the transformation that occurs?
So ultimately, the processing, so the laboratory work and any production of products that would be related is separate. So the CCC has allowed you to ultimately, under the new regs, open a cultivation site, open a lab, a production facility for any edible products or infused products, and of course retail would lend into that. Now, for what we're looking to do, retail is not part of our desire here. It's just purely on the laboratory work, the production work of the infused products and the cultivation piece.
All right, so
Which, according to
that's
this,
going to be up to you guys.
it would really just look like one other, which would be product manufacturing. So if that wasn't
So
in,
if we add product manufacturer to cultivator,
then I think that would be
right,
perfectly
and
fine.
I see the
for-
separate definitions here in the second last paragraph.
Yep.
Or actually third paragraph, the small one, 842.
Yeah, because we're not looking to be a testing facility or a retailer. It's really just
Cultivation
and
and
manufacturing.
manufacturing.
That's it.
Okay, I understand.
And I probably would have thought that the manufacturing would have been encompassed with the general concept of what we're doing, growing and.
But they
putting
do
the
appear
product
to
in.
separate the
Correct,
definitions out.
right, but I mean, I don't think it's a stretch for us to
No.
include that.
No, I don't think it is at all.
I would agree.
Yeah. Can we alter
Just
that?
make that edit. So he's got my verb, but it's manufacturing is the key word.
Yeah, the product manufacturing would be
Product.
the
Marijuana product manufacturer is the term we want to use, because that's laid out in the act.
Do we need to include testing facility as well?
No, I mean, at this time, we're not requesting anything like that, and that would be, my understanding of that would be if we were going down that path, we would be pursuing a state-regulated testing facility where other sites like us would be coming to us to test the product for compliance. So we're not looking to do that. I mean, we'll be doing an element of testing, but it'll be quality control type of testing, not, for state purposes.
Okay.
So bear with me for 1 minute.
I'm looking at 843, we need to strike it out, I think it was.
You're going to strike it out in 842, and you're going to strike it out in 843. And in paragraph 2, under 841, the last sentence is underlined, the town.
Has already considered, evaluated,
The town has already considered
and evaluated.
and evaluated the impacts of marijuana cultivators and
And.
marijuana product manufacturers, which would be the new language, which shall be excluded from this moratorium.
And in paragraph B of 843, Mr. Wojcik, do we
So you
need
get it twice, right?
Right,
You knock
twice
it
in
out at
843, I believe.
A and B. So those would be your edits.
Okay.
So just to be clear, we're striking it in 843, and by it, I mean marijuana product manufacturers, correct? We're striking it in 843 A and B, we're striking it in 842, and we're adding it at the end of the last paragraph of 841 after the last comma. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, and for consistency's sake, in 843B, will you exclude marijuana cultivators? You might as well say,
Added
and
it.
product manufacturers.
Yep.
Everybody see where we're?
Yep, works for me. We have a motion.
I move that we adopt the regulations as amended.
I'll second that.
All right, it was made by Dave, seconded by Mike. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So it's the will of the board now that this would be transmitted to the planning board for its consideration.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Set. Thank you.
All set. Thanks.
Have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
All right. Item 2 is place budget supplemental question for Prop 2.5 override on the May 7th, 2018 annual town meeting warrant and possible votes. I'm gonna read through the memo part of it.
I actually think you have to. I think that was council's advice, that the wording for both the warrant and the ballot has to be exactly as it appears in this memo.
All right, so per town council, the following motion is required by statute to be voted on by the selectmen using this phrasing. I move that the board place the following General Law, Chapter 59 at 21C G question on the May 8th, 2018 election ballot. Shall the town of Douglas be allowed to assess an additional $1.5 million in real estate and personal property taxes for the purposes of funding municipal and school operating expenses for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018, yes or no? The question as it appears above is also the exact phrasing required for the ballot.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it was made by Mike, seconded by Dave. Is there any further discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Well, that was easy. Place a levy limit override question on the May 8th, 2018 election ballot and possible votes.
I think that's what you just did.
Yeah,
You did them both at the same time.
okay. And then,
Sufficient.
that's it. So we're on to 4, the budget discussion and possible votes. So, and I know, Matt, you and I had talked a little bit about looking at a generalized overlay budget, showing bottom line numbers per department, not overly granular, but reflecting a lot of what we'd already reviewed ad nauseum.
Well, at the urging of the finance director, I've replicated the format of the warrant.
You're welcome, Tim.
Yep.
This is Gene's famous spreadsheet, is that what this
This
is?
Oh, Matt adopted it.
That's what we're familiar with.
It's not terribly unlike what I passed out for FinCom the other night. I just cleaned up some details. But this is exactly how it would appear on the warrant. And what I've attempted to do is show you the fiscal 2018 budget that was approved, and I think I've got a couple of fall town meeting adjustments were made and they're captured. So really this caption at the top of this column should say fiscal 28 after all the additions from fall town meeting were made. Because there was a transfer to OPEB that I'm catching
Yes.
in the numbers. The second column would be the draft that was circulated by Chairman Morse. And then the last column is, we really didn't solidify anything. We had a discussion vehicle. That was my attempt to make a 5-year budget balance if the override were passed, taking into consideration the priorities that would inform the override question in the first place. The library, the schools, primarily those 2 functions. So you're able to compare now what the impact would be.
So the question that I have on the because I'm kind of just flipping through quickly, and I mean, do we want to just go through each department by department?
I think that would be the best,
All right, so we'll start at the
the
top.
cleanest, and then whatever you vote, we'll be putting in the warrant. I mean, we gotta finalize this thing so you guys can sign it.
Okay. So, just so I'm sure that I'm clear on this, so we'll start with selectmen, wages, expenses, and then subtotal? To where the FY 2018 budget shows 185,622. My draft was 188,008, And with the override, it comes to $188,484. Does that sound? Yes.
Well, you want to do just the second column, is that what you're going to say?
No, I was going to say, I want to make sure I'm understanding, the override column is the only column with steps and COLAs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so
Well,
on,
there's the COLA in the chairman's draft of 1.5, because that's what you used. I'm just replicating what you used. With the override, it's 1.75 to mirror the teacher's contract that's in force for the years that it's in force. After that, it drops back to 1.5 in the model, and the steps would be there on the town side, which doesn't generate very much numerical activity, but it does pick up. You can see, so when you look at wages throughout these numbers, you'll see little differences. Those are the impact of doing steps and a slightly higher COLA with the override.
You're looking at me, Gene. What did I do?
in my opinion, the way it's crafted here, you're going to be looking at the main budget, which I don't know if you brought the regular town meeting, did you bring that? And the supplement budget will be just as large, right? Because you'll be adjusting each department. And again, in my opinion, I think that will be confusing to the voters.
How do I
Well-
simplify it?
Yeah, I guess it's the will of the board if you want to do that. But it's going to look like you're outlining it's going to look like the override's voting steps and COLAs, and you're getting away from the bigger issues, and that concerns me a little bit.
I was going to say the same thing. I was under the impression we're doing an override to give steps and COLAs, but that's what I had heard as we started this.
You have to take those into consideration, because if you look into people that are not sitting within a collective bargaining agreement, okay? Collective bargaining, there's contracts in place, there's guarantees of steps, COLA, lanes, all those things are in there. When you bring that to non-collective bargaining employees, you're going to force them to become a collective bargaining unit.
No, I understand.
So, or you run the risk of losing good talent.
Again, I just thought the override vote was a supplementary vote, and I expected a shorter list there.
Okay.
I didn't expect to see the entire budget again with smaller increases as part of that. It's your decision. That was just my impression.
And I guess I had the same impression, to be honest with you, to make it clearer in terms of, and simpler for people to understand, so that they're able to make their decisions. This gets, I agree with you, it gets very confusing.
It's confusing, but it's kind of a double-edged sword. And the reason why I say this is that a lot of the people are asking for granular detail. So they want to see what does this mean with my tax dollars going in, or you're asking me to pay additional money? I want to see everywhere where it's going. And I have been asked that question on a multitude of occasions, to where if you say, here's a general overview, here's a supplemental, and there's dollars and cents that are shifting hands here or there, you're giving the perception of smoke and mirrors. If you're asking people to pay an additional amount of money in taxes, you give them the level of detail that they ask you for, or as much information and detail as you can give them, and say, this is what I'm doing, this is what it means across every department and every line item and every penny. Because the last thing I want to be doing is going back to somebody and being scrutinized over a budget saying, well, I didn't understand this part. Yes, does the budget include COLA? Absolutely it does. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, I have a suggestion. If
Sure.
you do the whole Fred Argle, 3 Rail Press Drive, maybe you do both. Maybe you do what's here, and you give more of a summary that says, here is steps and COLAs across municipal departments in total,
Mhm.
here is library included, here is school department, here is whatever, and try to chunk it into those 4 or 5 main pieces as one part of the kind of view of this, and then you do this as well for the folks that want the details.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I'm comfortable with anything you want to do. I just think there is a decision that you guys have to make on COLAs and steps. And we can be consistent as between the austerity budget and the override budget, or not. It comes down to the decision an employer makes. So if the schools have settled a contract with steps and lanes in it, and we're pretty much done with the police officer's contract, are you gonna treat everybody else differently from the groups that you have contracts with, or have already settled the contract with? You know, I guess you can go either way. You can say the budget's under pressure, so we'll do it for some but not others. Or you can say, we're an employer, if you get a step in the schools, you get a step on the town side if you're eligible for one. Under one scenario, but not the other. What I've been saying all along is treat everybody the same. It's so much easier. And I hate to do that, because one union goes first, so they set the pace for everybody else. Nobody likes to negotiate in that environment. But the fact of the matter is, the teachers' union has settled the contract with the school department. That was a 175, 175. And the 1 is the year we're in. So for the next 2 years, it's 1.75 COLA with steps and lanes. So
I sit on the same mindset, and I'm open to suggestion from, it's not my decision, it's all of our decision. But I don't, I've just never felt with, like, you take contractual employees and treat them one way, and then treat your non-contracted employees another. You know, we're all employed by the same community. If COLA's involved in collective bargaining, then COLA's involved in non-collective bargaining units. And to me, like I said, if you treat the two work groups differently, you're inviting additional collective bargaining units to show up.
Aren't you automatically treating them differently by virtue of some COLA not taking place unless the override takes place?
Right.
Right, so you're already hit that mark. But I'm inclined to, I mean, we've done it that way, and not that every time we do something like we've done in the past, it's the right thing. I'm inclined to be of the same mindset. I just, the optics of it, you know, this is gonna crush a lot of yes enthusiasm, I will say that.
The yes enthusiasm shouldn't be based off of the fact of doing what you'd call fair negotiations with all employees. The yes enthusiasm should be very simply to the fact of, it doesn't matter how we choose to carve this up, and it's all open to suggestion. The enthusiasm should be there looking down the road 2 years from now.
Well, can we put this in perspective? We're talking 45,000 bucks? Right?
Yeah,
Right.
roughly.
I think I agree with you. I just think it's the way I would present it. I agree with everything you said. The main budget should include those. The supplemental budget, which is contingent upon the override passing,
Yep.
has to be those lines that will be directly infected by the override.
Okay.
I think the confusion here is the chairman draft and the overline for some of those steps and COLAs are different. So that's making that second article list everything again.
Understood.
So I think, again, in my opinion, under the chairman draft, it should be the 188, 484. That's not contingent upon the override. From what I'm hearing you say, I don't think you wanted that contingent upon the override passing.
It's a $16,000 difference.
Yep. And you're correct. The chairman's draft was based on no override, I believe.
Right.
And then with the override. Yeah, it seems like the numbers are off there.
So I think and maybe it's easy to look at the supplement first and figure out what you want contingent upon the override, and then work backwards.
Makes sense to me.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think it's a simple decision, and it should be consistent between the two budgets. You're either gonna give COLAs and steps to your town side employees or not. If it's not in one budget, it shouldn't be in the other, just for the sake of simplicity.
Right.
All your wage lines would be the same in those two columns. You're making a policy decision one way or the other, and it'll be consistent regardless of the override passing or not. Because we could, if we're doing, if we should back out, I mean, that's even more complicated.
Can't you have, the summary would show that there's only a small amount of the extra we're asking for is for the COLAs? So people would spotlight on where the money is really going?
Well, you would hope so.
Yeah.
But in the world of public opinion, you argue about small things.
Sure.
Because it's a
Good
principle.
question.
Financially, it's not a big deal. Now, listen, if you put 0 in here, that is a big deal for COLAs. But not as big a deal as you think. It just reversed 28,000 if you zeroed out the COLA. So for everybody who hasn't negotiated one yet, didn't get one, you'd save 28,000 versus giving them a 175.
Okay.
What's the consensus, guys?
I mean, I think we have to recognize that, you know, salaries and benefits are the town's biggest expense, am I correct? That's where most of the money goes. I mean, regardless of whether we have an override or not, the majority of that money goes to salaries, to our employees who work hard for the town. It seems sensible to me, to say the least, that everybody gets treated on an even scale.
Who do you sit with it, Al?
I'm concerned with what Gene is saying about, you know, the confusion following it.
But I agree with you, Matt. I think it should be in both versions. You know, we either treat everybody the same or,
Yeah.
you know, whether it's an override or not. And that eliminates a lot of that confusion.
Oh yeah, a lot of line items go away.
Yeah.
They won't
Right.
change at all.
No, I think that's the approach we need to take. And that's not what we're sort of really talking about here.
So let's settle that part of it first. So are we all in agreement that moving forward on that line item, COLAs are treated the same across the boards, or do we want to take those off the table for non-collective bargaining?
I'd say we treat everybody the same.
Tim?
Yeah, the same.
All right,
Yes.
so we're all in agreement, COLAs stay.
Otherwise, it's perhaps a little deceptive if we don't do it.
Yep. So that changes this a wee bit.
A little bit. When you say stay the same, you mean 1.75?
Yes, sir.
And then you have to decide the step question. Which does not, well, yes, it would, because it's in one model and not the other. You turn the steps off and you do your draft.
Yep.
I turned them back on for the 5-year override.
That's the one that I'm hung on. I mean, a cost of living adjustment is one thing. The steps is where I've always struggled, because I don't care for those in any of the contracts.
Are we gonna look at the steps as analogous to the COLAs or no? Or something different?
Something different.
I don't know. Explain to me how they're different.
That was kinda what I was getting at.
Well, there's one big difference. Not everybody gets it. There are only very few town employees who are eligible for a step. We have many employees that are maxed out.
Look at a cost of living adjustment as something that comes along to try and help battle inflation. A step is like a time and grade. Like, I kind of revert back to like a military look on it, like.
No, and I understand the difference between a COLA and a step. I want to understand the difference between,
Treating them differently.
between employees.
Well, there's certain benchmarks that you have to meet in order to get to a step, and I believe it would have to be negotiated into your initial employment agreement with the town.
Right.
Or
But I
based
guess
off
my
your
question
possession
is,
is.
if the teachers' union are allowed to get their steps, the police union is allowed to get their steps, why wouldn't non-union employees be also allowed to get their steps? And if we say they're not, why is it different from COLA? Because I don't see it as any different.
How much do the steps amount to?
So you'll see that number in red right now is at 5,000. If you turn the steps on for next year, it's $12,000.
So a difference of 7?
Difference of 12.
A difference of 12, sorry.
So that's what your initial.
So
number
that
came from.
recognizes all the town employees that would be taking quite literally a step into getting steps.
Yeah, I mean, without getting into too many specifics, I mean, we have a mechanic we just hired who's going to get additional qualifications to get a step.
Yeah.
I think you're the only director that's still eligible for steps, right?
Don't base it on me, please.
But you only have one more left.
Yeah.
And so that's really kind of what it is. It's dribs and drabs. It's an employee here and there in our departments.
Yeah.
I think we have 2 at Highway that would be eligible. 2 at Town Hall, 2 or 3 at Town Hall.
There's 10 steps. You know, the reason why I'm not maxed out is because we've had a step freeze, I think, 3 times since I've been here. Regardless of your decision, if you say steps should not be included, then I still don't think they should be part of the override budget. You know, you want to keep that budget as clean as possible. So I think your decision again, in my opinion, that override contingent supplemental budget should be these lines and very specific. So
Right.
people are not arguing over the little.
Yeah, and I think they should be included. I don't think it should be treated any differently from COLAs. That's my opinion.
I would side with Mike.
Once you started the COLAs, you should be.
Yeah, I don't know how you can draw the line and
Right,
separate
it
that.
just encourages division, and that's not a healthy thing.
Which is what we're trying to avoid.
Exactly.
Fair enough, so we turn steps back on.
I'm just gonna put my open meetings hat on and ask that you vote that, so that we,
I need that anyways for the personal compensation.
To
charge.
both COLA and steps? I move that we include both COLA and steps.
I'll second.
Made by Mike, seconded by Dave. For clarification, it would be in both the override and non-override budgets.
Correct.
That these are included.
Correct.
Apples and apples.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, here's your vote. So we've agreed. So
And,
that is-
and the COLA is 1.75.
yeah.
Sorry, I wanted it specific, it's because we were using 1.5 and 1.75, you could just,
So for clarification, 1.75 COLA and steps for eligible in both budgets. And we're all in agreement.
Yes.
And now we're looking at apples to apples.
Right.
Okay, so that definitely modifies this.
It does, but for purposes of discussion, the far right-hand column for compensation lines is going to be equal.
So the far right column
Is controlling now, because
Yeah.
that had both steps and COLA in it at the level
okay.
discussed.
So we
So
just
that's
need to
your real
modify the
number.
draft side.
That's
Right.
the only line we're modifying then, is your draft,
Okay,
correct?
so should we just go over, for argument's sake, to at least go item by item under the override questions by department and say, this is what it looks like with the override, and then try and back this or put this where it should be or true it up on the non-override side, so that way we can get it into a warrant. Right?
I think so.
Right, discuss, yes. I can fix it quick while you're
Okay. So, we're looking at, with the override, selectmen's budget subtotal of $188,484.
Oh, can I just interrupt for a
No,
second?
you can't. Go ahead.
You just told me I couldn't.
Go for it.
Why don't we just read the total selectmen
Great.
budget? Oh, okay. I take that back. Do it the way you want.
I'm gonna go to that side of the table. You're all stressed on this side.
There's no stress. I'm looking. Where am I missing total?
No, he wants you to go down to this piece.
Oh, the total selectmen budget? Okay, that's fair enough.
Right there, you were doing the subtotals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yep, I was just gonna go subtotal off of this and then,
Yeah, but the way we usually approach it is like
Yeah.
total selectmen.
But this will be publicly available, so for
Sure.
purposes of our discussion.
we'll just do all the totals. Fair enough?
There's wisdom in Hughes every day.
Constantly, that's why we keep him around. That and he's a snappy dresser. So the total selectmen budget is $291,606 with an override. So the finance director, yes,
This is the.
I'm just giving up.
I'm sorry. This
Welcome
is-
to my life.
Here, Gene, come in.
You're voting the base budget, right?
Right, which is,
So it's not with the override. This is the base budget you're voting now.
So we should be voting on the chairman's draft, correct?
But
No,
Matt's
no, this is
modifying the
the-
chairman's draft.
Yeah, so
So
this
we were
is-
going over the override side.
Right, but this is the base budget. This is not with the override yet. I know what it says on top, but I crossed that out on mine.
All right,
well, why does it say with override then?
I crossed it out, see?
all right.
But
So the
doesn't-
far right column is the base budget, Matt?
If,
No, that's the one with the override.
I know, but you're doing the budget first, correct?
Well, I'm not quite sure what we're doing now.
What we were gonna do is go over the far right, which Matt had outlined to us here, saying that this was the override numbers by department. He's amending the chairman's draft, which would, I believe, was supposed to be the base budget.
Okay.
Yes.
So
That's
the
how
to-
I understood it.
Yeah, so the total selectmen would be 291,606 in both, correct? So there's no difference. between
Correct.
The base
Okay.
budget and the override budget.
So, but there's gonna be some line items that there
That
will be a difference.
But with
And-
salaries, there,
And that will be the supplemental budget.
Okay.
The one with the difference will be the supplemental budget.
yep.
Contingent
Okay.
upon the override passing.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, are we all on the same page now?
I think so.
I'm trying not to confuse people. I'm doing the best that I can.
I know, I'm just trying to help.
I know you are, Gene. I was just being a smart aleck by saying you can come and sit here.
Okay.
But you can if you want.
No, thank you.
I'll let you.
I
No?
appreciate that.
Fine then. All right, let me go down to my next total. All right, right here. So under total finance director, accountant, and audit, I have 157,281. Does that sound correct, everybody?
I believe so.
Mr. Hughes?
That's correct.
All right.
Don't lie.
Under assessors for total, I have 137,708. We all in agreement on that one? Total treasurer collector, 280,298. Total FinCom, 55,700. Total technology, 90,570. Total town clerk, 126,554. Total public building maintenance, 191,404. Total permanent building committee, 1,100. Total community development would be 198, 197. And then the total general government of 1,530,768. We all in agreement so far?
And there was a total other general government for $350 right before that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I was gonna point that out as well.
I'm sorry.
Of
I'll
course
let
you
do
were.
the
But
next
then,
one.
that's okay, but then,
This is
I thought
bad.
he'd yell at me.
Did you say other general government?
Yeah, that's the moderator.
I was not gonna yell. Have I ever yelled at you? I don't
Very
yell.
detail oriented.
All right.
Is that $1,000?
Which brings us to public safety. And I have a total police budget, 1,754,613. Total fire of 491,525. Total ambulance of 381,031. Total building department of 89,940. Total tree warden of 10,600. Total civil defense budget of 3,125. Sealer of weights and measures, 750. Animal control, 25,000, and total public safety of 2,756,584. Are we all still agreeing here? So public works. I don't have a total public works.
Well, you start with cemetery.
All right. So cemetery, I have 10,260.
That'd be total highway.
Thank you. Of 762,607.
And then total public works.
Yep. Well, I got other public works that are in here.
Oh, excuse me, I missed that.
Mr. Detail Oriented.
I'll be quiet.
It's fine, Mike. Other public works of 1,400. Landfill maintenance 9,950. Monitor wells of 45,414. Street lighting at 56,764. And total other public works,
I think you're off.
I got that, sorry.
Yeah.
Total public works are 829,631. I don't have my glasses today either. Health and Human Services, we have the Board of Health at 35,751. For wages, oh, I shouldn't even go down.
43.
Yeah.
Yeah, just the subtotal.
Subtotal is 43, sorry about that, 43,264. The nurse at 13,000. The animal inspection, 39,19.
Total Board of Health.
Yep, and total Board of Health of 60,183. And Council on Aging, 86,627. Total veterans, 104,350. And total Health and Human Services comes to 311,343. Which brings us to Culture and Recreation of $3,000. Total Library of $227,572. I don't hear you guys cheering back there.
Oh,
Total culture and recreation.
Culture, total.
There's something,
What's
there's a
the matter?
myth somewhere.
now you're working on the base budget, right?
No, actually, when he got into the library, that's not the base budget.
That's correct. So, but Matt's working on the base budget, so your base budget is the 2,701? And then the supplemental piece would be the difference?
Thank you. All right. So the base budget, the correct number on that is $2,701.
Those aren't my numbers. Just want them clear. Yes, 2,701, and then that's where the supplemental budget would be.
Correct, because that would
And that
be,
is the override column of 224,871.
that's right, because the base budget does not have a library. Got it.
Unless you want it to have a library. I'm just reading the numbers.
It's not a matter of what I want. It's a matter of what we can do. So the base budget is 2,701. The override budget is 227,572. Which would bring, well, Memorial Day, $1,750. Base budget for total culture and recreation would be 7,451. With the override would be 232,322. Douglas Public Schools. So Matt, I may need some help on this one. Because the override number is what we were going down through, and then we were gonna back into what the base budget is how we were going through the exercise originally, even though the base budget stayed the same on the first part of this. So should I wait for Matt to finish up to start going in schools and the rest of the way down?
Until he catches up.
Okay. So we're gonna pause.
No pressure, Mr. Wood.
Are you done yet? Are you done yet? No. I'm
Just
just
had a
kidding.
question, going nitpick maybe on street lighting, weren't we getting the Green Communities grant was gonna make our street lighting more efficient. Is that factored in here in any way?
So on the street lighting account, you should see a decrease from fiscal 2018 to all of the budgets. From about $44,000 to,
45.
oh, is that, when are we gonna do the install?
I don't think it was gonna have an impact on 19. I thought it was 20
It's
that we'd
20.
see it.
20?
I'll double check in a second, Hal. Because I don't think we're gonna, we'll probably do the procurement. I really think we're looking at next spring, a year from now. So you'll be real close to the end of the fiscal
Yeah,
year. We
so
didn't budget
wouldn't-
savings,
yeah.
speculative like that.
Following year.
The following year.
That's when we get the cheap streetlights.
We did.
Yeah. Okay, so
Oh, no, we kind of paused because we're doing school budget, and then we gotta go base and then override, which is, this is where you see the differentials. The
Just-
library was the first one.
Just for process, just so I understand, where's the finance committee in their budget deliberation? I know they've had some pretty lengthy meetings.
I think they're waiting for this.
Yeah,
Still waiting for us.
they are
Yeah.
meeting, they have a joint meeting with you next Tuesday,
Yep.
April 3rd. And they have, you'll probably be giving them your budget at that time. And then they have 2 meetings on the 9th and the 10th. I'm trying to see if the chair can move the public hearings right now scheduled for April 10th. We're trying to move it to April 9th to give them a little more time for any discussion they may have, because we have a flyer deadline of April 12th.
Nothing like down to the wire, right?
It always is. If we can get the state to give us numbers earlier, and it would be very
Yes.
helpful.
I think we've been asking for that for a while.
Oh, yeah, I get tired of hearing myself talk sometimes.
And that's still not solidified,
I never
right?
get tired of hearing you.
Thank you.
You gonna stay on that side now?
It's a little stressful on this side.
Yeah.
Let me jump ahead to where you are so I understand what question you're asking. This is just ministerial. There are only a few lines that are gonna change between the two budgets. The
That's
library and the
school.
schools.
Yep, so we're on schools. That's why we were looking for that one.
Well, of that 1.5, hadn't we talked about capital improvements? Using some of that 1.5 for capital improvements?
So basically, your library appropriation goes up with the override, $224,871. And your school appropriation goes up $321,823.
All right, so,
Hold on, I'll do the math quick.
thank you.
No, that's right. He has it.
So the,
And
you can't see it from here.
what we sometimes forget is the OPEB contribution. In order to balance the budget and the chairman's mark, you reduce the OPEB contribution by $75,000. That number would be restored with the override. So
Okay.
you'd be making a $125,000 contribution, OPEB.
All right, so the proposed budget school pre-override, is that 12,679 number? Is that correct?
12,679,853, without an override, 13,001,676 is a
Okay.
proposed number that, it's in here to demonstrate what you could do. It wasn't a final, I don't have that authority. I put in, I'll tell you what I put the values, I set the value at what you could sustain in a year-over-year increase to the Douglas Public Schools without losing a budget balance in year 5. In other words, if you did it, the schools could actually plan on having a 1% every year, and they wouldn't drive the budget into deficit. And that, whatever that equates to, 1% of that number. Obviously, it compounds slowly.
So,
About $130,000 a year.
And health insurance would be affected as well. Oh, sorry.
How?
No, it changes.
Yeah, there's a little noise there, that 3,000, I think.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's just a copy and pasting mistake, I think.
Okay.
So those are the 3 areas that the override impacts.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at that total, you're talking about $650,000.
22,000.
Excuse me?
622,000.
Thank you. So my first question as a voter is why you're asking for 1.5 million when you're only using $622,000 of it.
That's my question.
The rest is going to accrue to free cash. Well, I shouldn't say that, wait a minute. You have a year-over-year increase from this year to next year. You're comparing a budget, the chairman's base budget, that includes all the increases in pension and health insurance from this year to next. So, I guess I have to go back and create another column here and show you that. But, for instance, where's my health insurance line?
So then that leads me to a question, is that base budget really realistic? Can we, if the override doesn't pass, can we fund that base budget without a deficit and using additional free cash?
It was my understanding that the 1.5 million was designed to push us out for 5 years.
Right, you're still gonna generate a surplus. The surplus is gonna be about
Right.
$363,000 and some change beyond that, the comma. But so, just in 1 year, from the year we're in to next year, to the base budget for next year,
Yeah.
your employee benefits go up 150,000. And you have changes all the way across the board. So BVT's assessment is up 243,000. So we're adding up pretty quick now. School transportation
Is up,
is up.
okay. And I think that's what people are gonna need to see.
Right.
Because it looks deceptive without sort of then looking at the increases in the base budget itself.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
my apologies. Please, Brett.
Can I ask, how much free cash is used under the base budget?
Under the base budget, 500,000,
And how much would be used under the override budget?
0.
That's part of the difference.
It's a really big difference. But you would actually be saying you're committing to having a capital budget. When we look at the sources of free cash, what creates free cash, the prognosis for next year is very grim. Because you have no reason to think that the things you saved on this year, you'll save on again. You have a one-time insurance settlement, right? So there's a bunch of things that made the free cash number big and healthy this year that we already know won't be there next year. We had an unusually high increase in the motor vehicle excise tax because of consumer activity in town. That's what drives that.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
So what, with the override, what's the free cash balance that we would carry?
Well,
Assuming we spend every last penny of it this year that we have, it would be the surplus. That would be the only thing you would be counting on is the 363 surplus.
With the override, you would put the 500 back in, you wouldn't use that.
well, no, because the 500 will be voted. The 500,000 will be voted as part of the base budget.
Correct. And with the override, it'll be taken out of the budget.
No, the 500, it would affect the following year. It would affect when we set the tax rate the following year. In order to have a balanced budget, the first budget will be a balanced budget. There'll be use of $500,000. The second supplement will be contingent upon the override passing.
Right, that's what I'm asking about.
There'll be no reduction of free cash from there.
You'll be adding free cash back into the.
So what he's saying is the base budget with the $500,000
It's done. It's voted.
allocation, if the supplemental budget passes through, that $500,000 of free cash next year would be looked at as a $500,000 surplus, I think is what he's asking, because the overall budget is
Yeah,
under
and
the
I think
assumption
that's
of the
the problem with
utilization
the-
of no free cash.
It's the problem with being in the habit of using free cash as a revenue source. It's not real. It's a structural deficit. It's a negative number. So when you do the override, you're not gonna run that deficit. You're gonna fully fund your operating budget without using the piggy bank, so to speak.
Right, but I'm just trying to figure out how much is gonna be in the piggy bank if we don't get an override, and how much will be in the piggy bank if we do get the override?
Well, we won't know that
Why not?
because as I said, the sources of free cash are uncertain. You could actually,
Well, not known, but you have a projection, I'm sure.
So let's say we carry forward a zero balance on free cash this year. Let's say between rebuilding the stabilization account, spending for capital, and everything else, we finish this year with zero in free cash. We look to next year to replenish it. There is no source of free cash that we believe is certain enough to say that the number's any better than zero.
Well, I mean, we'll have some, because we're prudently conservative, but definitely, I don't see it at $1.5 million. And our turnbacks, I mean, the school transportation account, I'll use it as an example, turned back $185,000 last year. We are funding $53,000 at the special town meeting, so there'll be no turn back in that one account. The difference between, and I guess I'm gonna try to explain this. The free cash, the $500,000 will be used. So as Matt said, with capital, that will probably be zero as of June 30. Capital committee is gonna look to do some projects, so that will be used. The 1.5 gets added to the base, and whether or not it's appropriated is the change, but you can't confuse the two. It is a little confusing.
Okay.
It is confusing.
I really do think the most helpful way to think of it is, it's a deficit. You're covering a deficit up with unexpected revenues and turnbacks from town government and one-time revenue sources, none of which may actually occur. So the real story in these numbers is that without an override and attempting to austerity cut your way through the budget, you're counting every year going forward on having enough free cash to cover. If it doesn't materialize, you have to do additional cuts.
I guess the reality is, under the base budget, the austerity budget, you're borrowing against the future, an unknown future, hoping that might be the 500,000.
You're hoping that
Yeah, you hope, yeah.
somehow something will break your way during the year in a positive way. I'll use facetious examples, like maybe the price of gas will go down to $1.99 a gallon. Well, then all our fuel accounts will be rich. At the end of the year, we'll turn it back, it'll go back to free cash. You're hoping all of those things would amount to 500, so you could cover.
Right.
You've been very fortunate as a town that for the last several years, as you've increased your reliance upon free cash, you've always had something there that came back and helped you.
Right.
But when we sit around the table and try to figure out, well, can we really predict that? Is it responsible for us to tell the people of the town that we expect that to be there next year? I wouldn't sign that. I mean, because that's way speculative.
In playing devil's advocate, I understand what you're saying, but people are gonna say, all right, you don't know what it's gonna be next year. We have all this free cash this year, use it to balance the budget, and when you find out what it's gonna be next year, then come back and ask us for the override, because you'll know then how much you're truly gonna need.
Well, you're still relying on the override for these other categories.
And I understand that,
Yeah,
but I'm just
so,
trying,
you still have to
Yeah.
have a override amount, or an override amount.
I'm just trying to play devil's advocate of kind of some of the things we're gonna hear.
I got a few
You know-
things that would answer that, but one of them is, by the gift of God right now, your school choice in is generating more positive activity than school choice out, although it's getting close with students choosing to go to BVT as well as choice out in Norfolk Aggie. If there's insufficient resources for the Douglas Public Schools to compete for the students' loyalty, those numbers could continue to deteriorate, and your school choice out number could fly through the roof. In which case, that hits everything on the municipal side.
I'm sorry to have that meeting, but I would say that's a reason to actually allocate more in this year, because at the amount, and I don't want to sound ungrateful, you know, even with the override, where you're keeping it as a level service at best. I'm not sure that's going to start winning back loyalty. It's putting us in a position where we'll struggle to make keep level service in FY20, FY21. I don't think, you know, under the scenario you guys laid out, the 1% per year, 1% per year doesn't even cover half of this steps and colas
It just,
that we're going to have.
it just keeps the district limping along, is what you're saying.
We're going to continue to live with that.
I would agree with that.
To go back to that point there, I hear what you're saying about the use, continuing to count on the use of free cash is irresponsible and unsound. I think you could say almost that the idea to not use it would almost be as irresponsible, because you're almost guaranteeing an increase in BPT, an increase in school choice out.
But then you run into the problem of not being able to sustain.
I say that without judgment.
Yeah.
You know, but I'm laying on.
But it ends up being sort of kicking that can
Yep.
just a little further down the road and postponing inevitable.
To me, the override budget doesn't compel enough people in town to support it. The reality is we as a town voted for schools, new schools, and with that, the promise of a functioning school district. And if we're not putting enough teachers in and keeping class sizes down and providing the services that you've got, you're gonna have students that will just continue to leave the district, so. If there's appetite within the board, I'd like to increase that number and tell the people in the community that Douglas is a remarkable place to send your kids, and we think so much of it that we're gonna invest even more money into the system.
And what number would that be?
Well, this isn't just about the schools. Just like when people sat there and talked to me, this isn't just about the library. This is about the entire working budget as there is. If we have to modify the proposed budget as opposed to having a zero utilization of free cash, and we put $200,000 in free cash and use some of that money wisely towards the school to help the district implement some things, because the school choice out number raising, the school choice in number decreasing has an impact past just that. It also starts to impact the Chapter 70 allocation that comes through, and there's much deeper impacts that hit, us as a community. So I mean, I agree with, we can revisit the utilization of some of the free cash, which may end up hurting us on the capital side. But I think that taking another swipe, going back in and saying, well, let's increase it from 1.5 to $2 million. And to your point, Tim, people already have said, we're getting a lot of pushback in the community of, I have no appetite for a $1.5 million override. Now you want to come back and ask them for $2 million? They're going to ask you if you're on glue.
That's what Tim was asking.
No, I'm not saying, I'm just, look at that 1.5 and where's that going again? That's all.
Well, the 1.5 is going towards, number one, it keeps one of our services intact and whole, that people spoke pretty loudly and said was important to them, which was our library. So that's one thing that it's keeping. It's, to Brett's point, it's level servicing the school in year one. And the 1% overall over the next multiple years probably puts them into a position where they're struggling a little bit, and it prevents them from being able to augment their services to try and become more competitive in the district. my thought process is that, number one, we're putting a lot of hopes into additional revenue sources with, I mean, I won't pull punches, I'm looking very seriously at doing everything I can to push along the recreational marijuana portion of it, because that's revenue that we desperately need. So, and none of these budgets take into account anything other than our host agreement. It doesn't take into account recreational marijuana sales, it doesn't take into account anything else or any other potential revenue that we could get other than what we currently know today. So, if I was gonna gamble on anything, I would gamble on the utilization of a little bit more free cash, and I would put that towards our district to help Kevin at least try and get some programs put in, but I'm cautious about that because you don't wanna implement a program to find out in year 2, you gotta take it back away.
Well, yeah, you just heard of the uncertainty of free cash and it being there.
I guess the reason why I picked the numbers I did was that the town can and should pick up the capital expenses of the school through its free cash. If the free cash is there and they have capital needs, but what you don't want to get stuck into is a maintenance of effort snowball, because then you'll be right back at using $500,000 a year of free cash. The 5-year budget already projects that even with the override, you'd still be using $200,000 of free cash in year 5 of the model. That's not an outrageous number. That's, you can probably commit to that if you had that kind of stability going into the future. But to go right back to 5, you'll be right back where we're sitting tonight.
Would the use of the free cash on capital expenditures would free up money that the school budget would be having for capital expenditures that they could move to operational budget?
Well,
Only to the extent they've
unfortunately,
used it that way in the
the
past.
school, and Brett, do you have the number that the school presented as part of the capital this week? Actually, I have
It's
it.
$1.1 million over 2 years. $1.3 million.
224,000 in capital requests for FY19 was from the school department, ranging, and that's the piece that, well, that's what, it's on Courtney's spreadsheet. It doesn't include all the ones they voted, we picked the top number.
224 this year, 535
Right.
the year after, 377 the year after that.
So
So
the-
1.1.
So the operating budget is not addressing the capital needs, and I think that's the piece that's missing from here. You know, you added up the operating lines, not the capital lines. The school department, and you can speak to it, do not include these types of items in your operating budget.
Correct.
They are seeking another source of funding, and that's capital.
And I think that's how it's typically worked, is, you know.
I'm not criticizing, I'm just
not
stating,
every
I'm
year
just,
we count on it, but I
yeah.
think from time to time, school has, you know,
it's not a criticism.
Yeah.
It's just, that's how the process works.
I just want to make sure it was, you know.
No, but I think what they're trying to reconcile is the fact that we're asking for a $1.5 million override.
Right.
We're using $621,694 for operational. I think part of that's going to capital. And the other piece I have to caution you on is this year we're using $220,000 of free cash for snow and ice. We're still budgeting snow and ice at $155,000.
Yeah, good point.
You know, so there's still things, even with the override passing, that we're gonna be struggling with. But it doesn't lose my point on the school choice out, though. I understand. Yeah.
That's my biggest concern
So-
with this entire thing.
The proposed 13,016,76, what does that do to the district in year 1? Does that keep you whole?
No. I don't see a 13,676.
13,001,676.
Yeah.
Okay, that one. So, yeah, even if we, so if we got the override, what it allows us to do is to reinstate the cuts that we're currently planning to make, and the non-personnel cuts that we're currently planning to make under the austerity budget. It'll allow us to use less of our revolving funds, which kind of act like our free cash. Those are the things that we fall back on in case of emergencies. That we try try to dig too deep into, be able to carry a balance forward. Once we set our budget in May, we try and come back to the town, no matter what comes through the door, come September. That's where additional revolving funds, come into. As an example, I don't think we've used much more than $700,000 in school choice funds. We get about around that number in each year. We try to use about that number each year. We're looking at using $1 million about $1 million in school choice funds next year. No, this year we're probably $700,000 range, and only carrying $500,000 in 2012. Only getting probably $700,000. 2020, only getting $700,000 with that $500,000 at 1.2 balance. We can't use $1 million again of school choice funds then and leave a balance of $200,000. That leaves us in a place where we can't deal with an emergency that comes to the door, unexpected expense.
And they're in a, that could be a special ed student, and their school choice is scheduled to drop next year.
Right.
They're losing money in school choice in, is not net against school choice out. It's spent without a further appropriation by the school committee. It's scheduled to go from 686, 261 to 668, 550. So they are already taking, and again, I'm just trying to give you information so you can make an informed decision. They are taking a hit there.
So with the grabbing of monies from various revolving funds and what have you, there's no loss in teachers in the district next year?
That's our plan right now.
We made a commitment in August that the plan that we put in place when we reinstated positions that were desperately needed, that it would be sustainable for 2 years. And we're sticking with that. And as a result, we're digging deeper. But we're not setting ourselves up properly for
the longer
the longer term.
Understood.
Yes.
And again, while you're contemplating, our thinking at the time, I forwarded a long email I sent to the finance committee. We just didn't cover it during our meeting with them. When we had those positions back last August, we assumed a modest increase this year. We probably get a 1%, in that ballpark, 100,000, whatever it might be. Figuring if we got that, we could use again some additional, modestly additional school choice dollars in FY19 to help sustain us, keep there. When we saw a $200,000 decrease and not an increase, year over year, that really kind of set that whole plan back. With the override, it basically gets us back to what we were thinking, just to stay level.
Right, can you use the mic
Yeah.
so we can all hear?
Well, it's really for the people at home.
No, understood.
Your comments are gonna be lost, and I don't
Okay.
want to have that.
And again, just to get to our thinking is, we've been dealing with either cutbacks in previous years, modest increases in some years, level to decreasing services overall, and it gets to a point where doing that isn't getting us anywhere, because we're just seeing the dollars come back in on the town side, reducing what we're going to get the following year. We got to a point where we said we have to take a stand. We continue to do nothing and just die a slow death, or we're going to take a stand and try to fight back at this and try to reverse those trends on students leaving the districts and increasing the town expenses, and try to get this thing going the other way again, where we have a widening gap in our choice in versus choice out. Fewer number of students choosing to go to BVT. That's where we were.
What was your asked budget of FinCom this year? I'm sorry, I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
The total ask was
A little bit over
13,352, 52.
It was basically it was a $643,000 difference between what we asked for and the austerity appropriation.
So that requested budget that you had from FinCom,
Yes.
is that putting plans into place to start counteracting the school choice out, or was that to keep you whole?
No, No, it was level service.
Level.
But I'll couch that a little bit. It was level service, but it didn't dive deeper into the school choice funds. So I think even with the ask, we have potential to start investing with some additional school choice funds.
So if I modified the 13,016,76 that I have proposed off of the override budget, and put that to your requested budget, which was 13,003 what?
352.
352?
Something like that. 323.
323.
What are the 322,000?
Would you be able to, and then the proposed moving forward 5-year plan at, you know, I know it's a horrible number to look at 1% barring anything catastrophic that's happening. Would it put you in a position that you might be able to start implementing things to compete and offset your choice out number? Because it's, I think it's like, the asked budget right now is like probably over 4% increase.
What? No, it's
No.
3.5. So, I mean, where our revenues only go up 2.5, to where if I even changed it to say, all right, I can do 2.5% on top of that every year, which I can't guarantee and balance out for 5 years. But would it put you in a position to start winning? Or try to start winning? Absolutely, Ken.
Yes.
You don't need to sit in the wooden chair, I know they're brutal.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, my seat, Kevin.
And you got padded ones over there too, you know.
These are from the school, the wooden ones.
Parochial school, probably.
Oh, your middle school.
So it's kind of an uncomfortable feeling because I know that what the board is trying to do is to save the town, and we are part of the town, not exclusive to the town. What we presented last night at school committee was that we were at, numbers might be a little off, 640 something, I think, 640 something thousand short in order to stay level services. Now remember, we made a commitment last year. The school committee had the courage to go forward and dig deeper into their school choice and circuit breaker monies, and used a great deal of money to reinstate positions. These are all positions that had been cut. There was one new position, which was a Title I math teacher. So the budget that we built this year was level. We didn't add anything, no additional staff, no additional programs. And that's where we came up $640 some odd thousand short. So last night, a combination of three things. Cuts in our line items such as supplies, textbooks, and so forth. Additional monies of, I think it's $111,000 out of circuit breaker, and then an additional I think it was exactly another $400,000 out of the school choice. So that would keep us with all staff members in place. We would obviously have to cut some supplies, and we would remain whole. We would move forward. There would be no additional programs or courses being added at that point in time. We would stay whole. The issue that you brought up, and I know that we've talked about it a number of times, is the turn that has happened in 2014, 2015. And that was the year that was probably the worst of the cuts that we had made. It was a third or fourth year in a row where we had made cuts across the board in the district. But that was the one that also included staffing cuts, total elimination of all athletic programs and band programs, which were then subsidized by a increase from 125 or 150 in user fees to 300 with no caps. Implementation of user fees for band and chorus that did not exist. And shortly thereafter, you saw the transition and the differences that you're seeing. So over a short 2-year period of time, there were 25 less school choice in students. There were 37 more school choice out students. There were 47, I believe, more Private school students, there were, I don't remember the exact number, 30 somewhat additional BVT numbers, students that arrived. Oh, you do have it? Thank you. Of course, I don't have my glasses, but that's okay. Yeah, so it was 37, so it was 25 less choice in, 37 more choice out, which is a hit. Private went up by 47 more students, went out to private school. BVT had taken an additional, over those 2 years, an additional 31 students, and Norfolk Aggie went up with 7 students. And that trend, I don't see the trend changing, and I think that's what Tim was trying to address, is the fact that those are the realities that we're dealing with, and we're seeing that trend stay constant. And again, if it's a little uncomfortable, because I know that there are needs across the board. We made a commitment. We stayed to our numbers all along, and we made a commitment that we were going to try to stabilize for these 2 years, and in the hope that things would change in the following year. We would have a better outcome, and we'd have better dollar amounts, and we'd be able to then begin to move forward. But right now, everything that we have built is, and was approved last night, is level serviced across the board.
So
And we've dug deeper into school choice and also circuit breaker.
And that deficit that you were dealing with last night was based on the base budget, where we cut you an additional.
So it was based on what we originally came in with, a level service budget, and the number that we received, it was 640, I don't know the exact, 643, 634, something along those lines. Right, and to be honest with you, consistently over the last, this is my 9th year in the district, over the last 7 years, we've been somewhere between 600,000 and 900,000, and the committee the last 2 years has made the decision to dig a little deeper, but going forward, it's again, with school choice numbers going down, it's not going to be there, and we won't be able to continue to maintain it. The thought process is one of two things. The committee had to make a decision. At 600 and some odd $1,000, you're going to let Rome burn, because you're going to have to eliminate. We would have to eliminate everything again. We would have to go and eliminate our athletic programs, our band programs, and we would have to make a number of staffing cuts in order to get to that number. It's the only way we'd be able to get there.
Did you plug that number into the magic spreadsheet, Matt?
Mm-hmm.
What does it look like?
So if we went with a 3.5% increase, and then somehow tried to stay at a 1% year over year after that, your reliance upon free cash grows to $350 in 2021 and close to $565 by 2023, just to break even.
Without any additional revenue sources, right?
Without any additional revenue sources, and with the other barely defensible assumptions that we can get a handle on school transportation and BVT.
Right.
That
So if those
somehow
two
next
things
year,
don't-
all we got was his base assessment. We didn't have any additional net adds to the student population at BVT. Or Norfolk Aggie, for that point. At the rate of their admissions, if they admit 4 more next year for a net gain of 3, that's almost an $80,000 increase.
I
So
just
it's
did
all
some,
very tenuous.
I did some back of the envelope as well here, just real quick to see how sustainable that would be. So with, the FY19 number up there, the 13,323, and the 1% per year, basically, just to sustain what we can probably expect for steps and COLAs, you need roughly at least, probably 2% plus. So you're giving us 1% in the scenario. We would have to augment that with at least another 1% by increasing use of revolving funds. That would mean an additional $540,000 of use of revolving funds, increases incrementally over the years, roughly 133, you can see the numbers there, you don't see the numbers there, but $133,000 would be the 1% increase that we get from the town. We would have to match at least that with additional revolving funds in order to kind of sustain a level service from whatever we do with those additional monies in FY19. So gets to a point where we can probably do that for a few years. I'm not sure how far out we can go with that.
But hopefully, it will give you some time to build your base again.
It
Your
does.
percentage would be on top of the base. And if it turns around, the school choice outnumbers and the
Right.
BVT numbers a little bit, that's gonna help all departments. And that's what I have to say. I understand your point. You know, the way we're going now, without an override, the school's taking a huge hit, the library's eliminated. Next year, because that department's not stable, they will be at net school spending. Every other cut will be coming from the municipal side.
So, I know you're meeting again with the Finance Committee again on Tuesday, and maybe we can come back, I don't know if Kevin, that sounds good, if we can come back to say, okay, if we were to get the full ask, what would that mean? And in my mind, I can't speak for Kevin or Courtney or anyone else, but we would still continue to dive a little bit deeper into our school choice, so we can not only level service, but we can start investing. I think that would be the wise thing to do.
And to kind of go off on that point is that even with the override, it's certainly not like high times for anybody. And there's still a lot of legwork that the town needs to do. There's exploration on health insurance and find ways to save money in that. As Matt had said, try and find ways to save money and get creative with school transportation. You know, try and find a way to stabilize BVT. There are, if any one of those things don't go through, you know, I mean, we're in a tough spot. But when the thought of an override came through, $1.5 million seems like a tremendous amount of money. You know, when you look at it, you know, from based off of the person's average salary on a municipality side, it's really not. Like $1.5 million does not go very far in any one department here. So we wanted to be able to go to the, well, my thought was to go to the taxpayers and to the base and say, this is what we need to stabilize, and we still have a lot of work to do. There still may be cuts that we have to make, maybe not this year, but next year. But I certainly didn't want to go in, like, to really make the town whole. The override number would be 2 times what we just asked for. Maybe more.
Well,
And then
Let's
looking at
not-
how that free cash number increases, we find ourselves back in the same situation again in
What I'm-
2023.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate, you know, I'm up here lobbying, but I get that this is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube here, you know, it's just, there's so many.
Well, those are
you know,
solvable.
That would be much
Yeah.
easier.
Well, you know,
That would be
trying to
much easier.
solve I can't solve them, but someone could, you
while
know.
blindfolded.
But yeah, but every move you make one place, it has an impact the other place, and you know.
So we'd be both back to sort of where we were.
Yeah, but I'm
3-4
trying
years
to
from
find
now.
that place where, the place where you can fund the schools and then somehow find a way to not have as much increase on the town side for school choice or whatever it might be. And we can take a stab at, you know, what was offered under an austerity budget isn't gonna do that. The extra 320 helps, I'm still not sure. The additional 300, I think that starts to move the needle, but how long can you sustain it without something else helping the equation out?
And that's why I said, this is an uncomfortable conversation
It
to
is.
have, because we know that
It's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but it's one that needs to be had. Because regardless, one way or the other, you know, how the district does and what's going on in the district has a direct impact on the rest of the community.
Right.
If we have a failing school system, then we do not have a town, because that impacts property values, that impacts all across the boards. And it's the same thing with any of our services. Like, if we have a failing police department, that impacts your property values. Failing fire department, they're all tied together, and no one service that we're offering is any more important overall in the eyes of the community than the other. And we got to try and find a way to keep all of you as whole as we can, but you know, not walk in with a ridiculous number, you know, and ask the residents to try and come up and figure it out. And I mean, it's kind of up to us to say, well, yeah, this is an override. When you look at the size of some of the ones that have passed throughout the Commonwealth, it's a modest override. I know some people won't see it that way, but it's the truth. And it's up to us to try and figure out, as I said, we need to find additional revenue sources, and then hope that a lot of these other variables that we have in there, we're able to do something with.
I don't want the town to have the impression that we have a failing school district, because we don't. We have
Oh,
a
no,
very
I
strong-
wasn't, and I certainly wasn't trying to make that
Very
impression.
strong district, and I know that, I presented that FinCom on Monday night in detail, that, and I know that, Kevin, I've given you that, and we are still performing very well. And I think, when you mentioned BVT, it is our school, and I don't want to talk badly, but they're not having this conversation. And kids know that when they go there, that programs are gonna be there, teachers are gonna be there, sports are gonna be there, and they're not gonna be in jeopardy during the 4 years that they're at BVT. Whereas here, being as honest as I can be, they've been in question now for 7 years, the stability of them, and that's the difference.
And I apologize if I alluded that
No,
the
I
district was
just wanted-
failing. It certainly isn't, but
But the word is competitive, and I
Right.
think, again, in the programs that we are able to offer, we're very competitive, we perform very well. Where we're not competitive is the breadth of programs, and that's where we need to start investing.
But thank you for the opportunity.
So I guess, I just want to leave it, if you guys have real appetite for potentially increasing that further, I think we'd be happy to come back Tuesday to say what would happen.
I was
under
planning
that
on coming
scenario.
back Tuesday anyways, yeah.
yeah, I can say this, I'm not ruling anything out. I mean, nothing's set in stone, nothing's etched in
Do we have to
stone.
make that decision this evening, Matt?
Well, we're only asking you to sign the warrant on the 3rd. You can change the warrant up to that point.
So we need to have our minds made up by the 3rd, is what he's saying.
You voted unanimously, so any one of you can vote to reconsider.
On the override amount, or?
If that's what you want to do.
It's a tough choice.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
My take with that is having lived through 2 override questions, we need to, in a very clean, crisp soundbite, explain what it is we're doing with that 1.5. And I'm sitting here at this table, and I'm looking at numbers, and I'm trying to think how we're gonna sell this to the community.
If we're having trouble selling 1.5, we're gonna have more if we increase it. That's the truth. The further north that number goes, the further south your voter turnout will be that'll support it. And it doesn't matter what you're telling them.
Yeah, I agree. I think 1.5 is the max that we could expect to get it.
We may have to,
Potential yes vote for anything beyond that guarantees that.
I don't think we can move above, we done, I'm sorry.
I was.
Thank you. I don't think we can move above 1.5. We're already saddling people with a heavy bill. It needs to be done. We know that. We understand that. But I don't think we can move above 1.5. What we're essentially doing with this override here is buying some time.
Yes.
And we've based it on a 5-year plan. And we're trying to buy ourselves at least level services for 5 years. Hence the fact that not all of the 1.5 is spent in the first year. Some of it is used as a hedge against future increases, and I think that's how we designed it.
Yep.
But I think to go above that number, and I'm not for a minute suggesting it isn't needed, it is needed, but we won't get any of it if the town doesn't vote for it.
if we have to do some, with the 1.5 that's in there and the allocations, I think that's the only place where there's wiggle room where we can shift a little bit if that's what we so choose that we have to do.
The allocations?
Yes. But I think the overall number is the overall number, because I firmly believe that if we go and ask for a penny over, it's just, you're guaranteeing your failure. And I think the success of this override is iffy at best, considering our history with it. I think that the public is significantly more aware of our financial situation now. I think it's become a lot more real to people now, but there's always going to be those people that are going to say no because they say no, or they genuinely can't afford it.
I think our job is to offer them an alternative to the fiscal disaster, if that's not too strong a term. Jeannie didn't frown, so I guess it isn't. That's going to occur if we don't. And I think we offer an alternative, and the alternative is the override we voted on. And we present 2 pictures of what our understanding, certainly with the able help that we've gotten from the school committee members and Mr. Maines, what will happen if we do and what will happen if we don't?
So we're all in agreement that the 1.5 stays,
Yeah, I
as
think so.
is.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I don't have an appetite for going above
So
that.
I do not.
It's, Matt, it's this section in here, like the override allocations, this we have to have settled by the 3rd?
Yes, because I think the supplemental budget in the warning needs to be firm.
I think
What
we-
accounts are you gonna increase by how much?
Yeah, I think we have the base budget. If they take a vote, we have the Board of Selectmen's recommendation. It would be the supplement. And I think the question is whether or not you utilize more of that 1.5 is part of the supplemental budget instead of having it available for future years or for capital. But
So dip more deeply into it on the front end.
it is.
With the understanding that it bites you on the back.
Which is what we would be doing if we sort of funded the school at their ask.
So it's, you front load it and then understand that it's not 5 years that we're in okay shape. I call
Probably
it,
3.
it's 3 or 4.
That hurts your sales pitch.
It's the truth.
Right, that's my thing.
But without it, and I'm not talking about without the increase, I'm talking without the override, your school choice out number, I'm very concerned about that number.
I
I said
agree.
that 3 years ago, when if the override failed, I was very concerned.
So I think,
I did.
are we all in agreement on the base budget?
Yeah.
I think so, yes.
So I move that we approve the base budget as discussed this evening.
Made by Mike, seconded by Hal. Is there any further discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So now what we get into is splitting hairs on the allocation for if the override goes through budget. And can I ask that we take a quick recess for a bio break?
Yes.
That's fine.
All right, we're back. Okay, so that was exciting. So I think
Break or the previous part of it?
all of it.
Okay.
Action-packed, I was riveted the entire time. So what I guess the only line item on the proposed budget that I think is really up for discussion on allocation, and is looking at the school. And my thought process is that we're rolling the dice on all of it as it is, with hopes of other adjustments, and I'm probably gonna give our town administrator fits in a minute, but my thought is that I believe we move forward on the requested budget with other department heads based off of the override. I would recommend that we look at doing the requested budget for the school for FY19 in an attempt to try and offset the school choice out number, or at least try and keep them as whole as we can. And just dig deeper on means in which that we can try and offset some of the other costs that are sitting in the background. That's kind of where I sit and look at it, which I believe they were 328.23. Was I right on that?
321,823 is what I have written down.
321,823.
Yep. There's your starting mark.
Can I ask the school, what does that do for the athletic fees? What is the current budget as is?
Keeps them at 225, which
225.
was the FY18 number. We've also spoken with the athletic boosters, and they made a preliminary commitment to donate up to another $25 per student athlete per session, up to $10,000, so we can get it done to 200.
200.
Which again, we think is another big factor.
Anybody
Big piece.
have any thoughts on that proposal?
If we do that, where do we get the money?
So that would probably, to Matt's point, as opposed to going zero dependency on free cash, would be a free cash number.
The entire 321?
I think it would have to be, wouldn't it, Matt?
Let me just reset the clock a little. So if we gave them 1% over last year, that was what we started off at, the 321, 823. Actually, no, that's over the base budget.
So the ask is 14,356, 462? No?
13,323, 500.
Is that on the total line?
No, it's not on the sheet.
Okay.
That was
Thank you.
you're welcome. It was the departmental request.
I get you. Thank you.
So actually, yeah, because total Douglas Public Schools is 14,356, 462.
And that includes transportation.
That includes
So you have to back up the transportation line.
About
So
1.3 million.
their request was not on the sheet.
You know, it's in there, Matt.
Yep. It's almost the same number. So you would have had a surplus of 363. If you take 321 of that and give it to the schools, your surplus would be $41,000 in year one.
And that ends up as free cash, Gene?
Yeah, that's your give back. And then the next year, you have a solvable problem because it's a deficit, but it's 5 digits with no free cash earmarked. Well, you run into trouble is 21 forward.
So year 3, we're back to where we are today.
Unless you have additional revenue source.
Right.
Which is what we need to push very hard for.
We don't have anything in this budget about the money from additional alternatives, do we?
We have the original host agreement factored in, but it's not in 19, it's in 20.
Okay.
You have to book a year's sales before they pay you the
Understood.
150.
Yes.
So.
I just wanted to see where we included it in the budget.
Yes.
So we put the 10 for this
Right.
fiscal 19 and 150 in fiscal 20.
Understood.
So, and then with the,
Assuming we approve it.
assuming we approve the recreational
Yeah.
grow and manufacturing,
Yes.
there's a potential 80,000 based on the will of the voter,
Yes.
which still doesn't really solve a lot of the problem, but it's moving in the right direction.
It's income.
It is income.
So at the most, this buys us 2 years to find additional revenue, which doesn't buy us a lot of time.
2021, based off of the modification and keeping the schools whole, I mean, I think if we don't get close to that in the school choice out, I think it has impacts down the line anyway.
Yeah.
So if we can't do something to stabilize it, but the biggest things that we really have to stabilize on that side are transportation and BVT.
Is that BBT assumption in 2020?
The way this is set up now, hoping that we don't have a completely tin-eared partner, is that we would level off the population and that next year's assessment would grow, but it would only grow by the rate of his base budget.
Yeah, so
Wouldn't be driven by student population, it'd be driven by his expenses.
that could prove to be false.
That's the weakest assumption in the model.
Which makes that
However,
bottom
3.5 would be high for him, for that school historically. This is the first year they've really been as high as 4.74. There's no arguing that fact.
You've averaged at least 3 of the last 3 years prior to this, though.
There, it's only our school if he answers to us, right? So if there are forces pushing his budget up and he doesn't isn't forced to deal with the way we've had to deal with them in terms of health insurance plan design, if he doesn't have that back pressure to force him to do those things, he doesn't necessarily do it at the pace he needs to do to make his budget livable for the rest of us. So I put it in at 3.5%, knowing that he wouldn't really be able to curb all of those trends. His biggest trend is our biggest trend. Retirement, pension contribution and health insurance. His premiums are up. He's got two plans. One's up 9%, the other's up 12.5%.
So long story short is, on the expression, damned if you do, damned if you don't. I just kind of figured if it's an opportunity that we can at least attempt to try and stabilize the school for a year and allow them to use the revenues that they would have had to dig into to try and do some other things. And we dig in and really do everything that we can to facilitate additional revenues and really sharpen our pencil and aggressively go at making it a more palatable partnership between ourselves and BVT, and then look at some alternative measures on transportation, which there's some decent ideas floating around out there. I think we got a shot. But I mean, we can't, no matter what it is that we do, nothing's really sustainable for an infinite amount of time. We just need to get ourselves as much breathing room as we can to get this budget off of our back and off of the taxpayers' back so that we can focus on other things. Because let's just face it, this budget has been all-consuming to this board and FinCom and the school committee and the police and fire department for months now.
Does the school committee think they'll scale back on some of its utilization of circuit breaker and school choice money if you were to get the departmental ask?
I think if we get the ask, then the question has to become, do we then use additional school choice funds to invest now? I think that's where you start to get the turnaround. That's where you start to turn the trend.
I agree.
So it's how much can we then use of that we can sustain an investment, make an investment and then be able to sustain that investment, that level of service going forward. That's what we have to figure out, probably on Monday, come back to you guys on Tuesday, as that's what we were offering earlier. If we were to get the ask, what do we do then? Because right now, we've been kind of just trying to adjust to, what's been offered.
If they can stabilize their school department and turn around the school choice out number, that does help. It's something like it's
like
reducing your,
revenue.
it is.
But the problem is
It doesn't
turn in a
happen.
year.
It's a slow,
I think we've
yeah.
been saying for a while, we need 3 or 4 good stable years, possibly some investment, and then you're gonna start seeing it. I
because
think
once parents make that decision to school choice out, they're not turning around the next year.
FY18 is our first good year. Trying to make FY19 at least as good as that.
Yeah.
If we get out 2 more years beyond that, possibly do some investment there, then I think FY21, FY22, that's when you start to get, get that, unfortunately.
It might not be a Hail Mary, but it's probably a 35-yard out, right, with clock ticking. I'd be willing to do it, Chairman.
It's not easy. And Brett, I think this whole board would like to see 3, 4 consecutive good years.
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
I'd like to see 1. Like, that'd be nice. I mean, that's just my thoughts. Does anybody disagree or think otherwise, or think we should be doing something else, or let's all go to Aruba and let someone else figure this out?
I alluded to it before, the negative side of voting this is it does not buy us as much time.
It means that
It
we
gives
just,
the school committee, the school department, Superintendent Maines, pick whoever you like, less time to turn the ship around.
well, I think it's you know, to the whole theme when I looked at the override. It gives all of us less time
Right.
to turn the ship around, and we're all in it together. And like, you know, when I first proposed an override, we either pass as a community or we fail as a community. And it's at the will of the legislative body.
Without it, I just think the optics of the override question is very difficult to explain and to, I think you need to tell people what you're for and what we're gonna do with it, as opposed to gripping on it and hoping for the best. Right, in my eye, roughly $5,200 tax bill, right, and I get X. Well, X is gonna become X minus whatever, but I can pay $600 more, and I'm gonna get all this and the schools that I was promised, right? To me, it becomes a question of value, and if we can show value, and yeah, it's not gonna last us 5 years, it might get us 3, and then we've been proven to be creative, right? We have to, we'll limp along until the additional revenue comes. You have to be able to tell each and every voter what it is we're doing here and why we're doing it. And it needs to be more than what I had seen tonight.
Well, it's, regardless of how we split it up, it's buying time.
Right.
Unfortunately, like the past couple of budget seasons that we've gone through, time was kind of our ally. A little bit, not really, and that's not the case anymore. Like, there's a serious clock ticking, and you know, it seems like all eyes are going to be on FY21, which they were going to be there one way or the other. I would rather see us having the opportunity to win with a district that's relatively intact, with the police department intact, the fire department where they need to be, and being able to provide our community the services they've asked for, based off of the tax dollar, and to Tim's point, the value that they're looking at.
And the library open.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, let's not lose sight of that. And it's one of those things, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yeah, I think the library being open part, if we have one more closure of the library discussion, I'm pretty sure Mr. Snook will have some form of a cardiac event, and that'll be the end of him.
Is he still here? No.
No.
He's here, he'll take care of it.
So,
Time to move, I think.
absolutely. So does anybody, I would need a motion on the adjustment of the school number.
All right. Just to be clear, for the interest of accuracy's sake, we're at the departmental request number of 143235.
13,323.5.
But well, the base
Give me
number
the
will
number.
stay here. Base number will stay at the 12,679,853. And the differential is, for the supplement, will be 643,147. Is that what you have?
Be right with you.
My man, I don't have my phone.
643,647.
Oh, you added the 500, yes.
Okay.
So 643,647.
So the motion was made by Tim,
Second.
seconded by Hal. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That was painful. All right, so we move down to total Blackstone Valley Regional, 1,209,547. That doesn't change on either budget.
It's up to you, Mr. Chair. That was the departmental request.
Okay, you know what? I'm just gonna lay it right out there.
I think that may be the one line item you may find difference between the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. They'll be taking that vote next.
I'm gonna be a trendsetter.
I wanted to.
I want that as a zero balance.
No.
Well, why would
You
not?
can't do
Can't do
that.
Can't do that.
You could do it by the 643, 647 though.
All right,
I think you
That
have
might
to
be
look at that
aggressive.
minimum contribution.
what's the
line.
minimum contribution?
it would be the minimum contribution plus debt. I don't know how the transportation factors in. It's in its own category. That was my only,
I think he has to break it out for you, but
What's the minimum give me a number.
you're gonna pay for the bus.
Where is it?
so it'd be the minimum contribution plus transportation plus debt then.
Yep.
So you'd be subtracting, what is it, 70,000 from his budget?
Said this is 70,000 less the,
All right, so take 70,000 off of that.
you have a calculator.
Do you wanna take off exactly 70 even?
No.
70,518.
75.18. Hold on.
So just FYI, 2 years ago, this is what FinCom recommended, was
Yeah.
to offer the minimum contribution, a modest reduction. I think at the time, 140-something thousand at the time.
Let's just live dangerously today.
1139,029.
That would be my,
The only thing is you can't spend the money, because if the other communities
Understood.
support
So-
it, then we have to, yeah.
But-
At some point, we need to get together with other communities and.
I think we might be. Are we connecting with other like-minded or like-positioned communities?
You want me to tell all my secrets here in an open session?
No,
Tim,
I'm sorry.
Observers of the same phenomenon are comparing notes.
Okay.
Good, let's move on.
so
There
that's,
are enough observers, you think?
I can count to 5 as a magic number.
so
Very close.
that number is, what is that up there? That's what I would propose.
1139,029.
1139029. Does anybody
yeah,
dis-
well, actually, we already voted to approve the base budget.
So this would be reconsideration and amendment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we amend our motion on the, we all voted unanimously, we can change that at any time. I believe you'd stated that, Mr. Administrator.
Yeah, my Robert's rules spidey sense is telling me to be official, you should reconsider that
Yeah, first
portion of the base budget. You have to vote on the motion to reconsider, then propose a number, vote on the number, and then carry it over to the
Do I have a motion?
supplemental.
We have a motion to reconsider the specific portion in our budget discussion entitled Blackstone Valley Regional.
For the base or the base and the
Well,
override?
we haven't voted on the override yet.
Okay.
All right, so for the base. Made by Tim,
Second.
seconded by Hal. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Now somebody can move the.
Can the chairman make a motion?
Absolutely.
I would like to move that we change the, what's that?
Of course you can.
Oh, I didn't know. Usually I don't. That we change the BVT allocation to 1139029,
Second. Second.
made by myself and seconded by
I beat him.
Mr. Hughes.
Just beat me.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So now we would make a motion off of the override budget.
Correct.
Anybody care to make a similar motion?
So this doesn't impact the override budget.
No,
Well,
but you,
We're changing the number that's on there.
But we haven't voted to approve the entire override budget, have we?
right, so you're just
No.
gonna put the number there.
So just put the edit. yeah,
So we
just
just
make
put
an
the
edit.
edit across.
We just
So,
voted to add change the school number.
Right, and then you'll vote on the amended.
Right.
thank you. I'm getting punchy.
Getting late.
It is.
It is.
All right,
Almost
so
done.
that brings us to medical reimbursement to $5,000.
Medicaid, yep.
Norfolk County Agricultural to 186,994. Is that the right number?
Yep. That's the tuition change plus $8,706.
Oh, good, I gotta do a ton of math for total education.
Oh, all right, let me help you out.
Yeah, you do.
What did I do to myself?
I've lost track.
Do we have a teacher in the house? Preferably a math teacher? No? I got my shoes on, I can't use my toes to help with this one.
But that's good,
I think I just heard Mr. Wojcik say he has a tool for this.
yes.
I've got an app for that.
I'm missing something. Bear with me. Hold on, I got it. Gotta pay for the buses. What do you got, Gene? I got 16,331,132.
You're on the base budget, right?
No. The base budget was 15,436,180.
So you just,
All right, so the base
I'll do
budget
it a
is.
different way and check my math. Hold on. Yeah, well, that wasn't hopeful.
This?
That was a
It's
screw
heavy.
up.
Bless you.
what do you have for the base? See, I took the 70,000 out of the base budget because it doesn't impact the override budget.
I don't have my usual keyboard, so I'm disoriented.
I have a base budget, because I took the 70,518 out of that, and I
Oh.
added the slight change into the BBT, into the Norfolk Aggie of 115,365,662. That's where I came up with. That's adjusting BBT at the 18699, I'm sorry, Norfolk Aggie at 186,994. BBT, I brought down to 10951. It only adjusts that first, the assessment number. So I reduced it 1165 by 518.
These are just copied and pasted figures for discussion purposes, so hold on. What'd you say you had?
Still off. 9.
Hold on. That's the problem. I'm pretty sure it should be 15,409,501.
That ties.
12, 6, 7, 9, 8, 5, 3.
The same number.
Can we get a fourth opinion?
Oh, the difference is the debt assessment, that's the problem. The total BBT, because we're taking, the
I think I got
43
it, yeah.
stays right, the 500 stays right. I'm taking 1165708, which is your original number. 1165 minus 7518. Yeah, that top, the BBT assessment number in this middle column should be 1095190.
But my total's still the
Oh,
same.
I put the, I know what I did. Thank you. 109.
1095190.
Says still keep my total at the 113.
I'm sorry, say it again. You had too many digits there.
I'm sorry. 10 95190.
All right.
That's the, okay. Now I equal your total education number. So that's the base budget, and then you're increasing the school on the other side.
And the final number is for total education?
For the override budget, $16,009,309.
Okay.
But what you'll see in the supplement is only the 643, 647. It'll be an increase to total to Douglas Public Schools personnel and expenses.
Clear as mud.
It'll be better once we put the articles, so you can see them on Tuesday.
All right, so total insurance and employee benefits stays the same, the 3911801. There's no change to that, right?
There's no change to that number.
Total debt service
If
stays the
anybody's
same?
wondering why those numbers are not the same, I'll explain it though, why there's the 3,000
Yeah.
difference. So in a scenario where you close the library, you save on health insurance, but you have to increase the unemployment insurance account to cover the town in case somebody files a claim. If you leave the library open, you pay for the health insurance, but you don't have to increase your allocation to unemployment. So there's a little bit of a swing.
Understood. Total,
In your scenario, there is no additional staffing to increase that health insurance with the override. That 643, 647 does not impact staff, correct?
No, that's when we're gonna come back and talk about whether we can now use some of our school choice funds that we're gonna have to use to just get to a level budget, now use that to invest. somewhere.
Okay, that's the big difference for us, because remember, health insurance is budgeted on our side, and we need that piece of information so we can adjust that number.
Right.
We have a very lean health insurance budget. We budget the census, the current census as of February, plus 5 additional families.
So, we could say, we're just gonna say level service. I personally think the right thing to do is, how do we make a targeted investment small?
I just think you set the budget for what we can afford, and you only hire up to that, and you figure in your fully loaded cost.
So if you guys wanna give us a number, I don't know.
Yeah, on the fly right now, probably not, but tomorrow, sure.
And I don't think we're talking about hiring a lot. I think, we're talking about a max of, can we invest $200,000 to $300,000 that we can try to sustain over a period? No, I know, no, I'm not, I understand, that might be 4 heads that now turn into $12,000, $15,000 of insurance. I don't know, but,
More than that.
Well, in a budget, what is it?
We budget 5 additional families, and any.
The family, our portion of a family plan's here in the model.
And the thing is, it's not just additional staff that may utilize that, it's any qualifying event. If you have spouse loses his job and they decide to come on the town's health insurance, it's someone aging up. Currently they could be, you have some new teachers, they be under 26 now, and
we have
then.
somebody small as well, like.
It is, but I'm just saying, it's for the number of employees, it's a tight budget.
So,
I got you.
So if there's
But
a no-
I get the impression that you guys would like to, if you funded us at that level, you'd like to see some kind of investment as well that's gonna help stem the tide and start reversing that.
We just need to know that piece so we can
Yeah, so
factor
I
it
think we
in.
need to work together throughout
Yeah.
Monday to say, okay, how many heads do we think it is?
Right.
And so
but don't go
we-
past 5. I said, but don't go past 5.
And I think that's probably what we're talking about
Not
anyway.
3,
I don't-
I
No,
need
don't go
some
past
buffer.
3.
I
Yeah,
need some
all right.
buffer.
A good rule of thumb, the
So
rule
we
of
need
thumb
to
is a
go-
family plan is 16.5. So for every 3 people you hire, you lose the ability to hire a 4th.
Okay. Well,
so
So now
we'll
you're
go
down to
back
3.
and we'll look at Kevin's plan, and we'll take a look at everything across the board and see, okay, what will get us the most bang for our buck.
I just don't like surprises unless it's chocolate, so,
No.
that's all.
That doesn't mean say 6 employees, but here's some chocolate, Gene.
It
That
doesn't.
that doesn't help out
Doesn't
either.
CVS on the Easter, 5% off sale on Monday.
Yeah, that's right.
That's true, huh? That and snow blowers, right?
All right,
Yeah,
so,
very
Keeps
good.
without the heads.
Now I know it's late.
Oh, God. Just made my day, Selectman
stuck.
Davis.
Bake the heads off.
Yeah, I know.
you Ozzy Osbourne?
Only on Peeps.
So, total debt service stays the same from the base to the debt exclusion, well, to the debt exclusion, to the override.
Override, right.
Transfer to OPEB, that changes from 50 to 125,000.
Right.
So the total budget request number, that's gonna change too.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Can we do the math tomorrow, or do they need the math tonight?
Yeah, I don't know if we need the math tonight.
In the interest of making certain it's right. why wouldn't we?
Well, that's why I wouldn't want it tonight.
We don't want it tonight.
We're meeting again prior to the 3rd.
Just you
Yeah.
guys.
Correct.
And we know what we're doing now.
So we're guaranteeing people are gonna tune in to hear what the final total budget number is.
Let's go with
Less than 29 million.
Yes. Actually, I
That
think
peep joke did rival anything that was on Roseanne the other day.
it really did. I'm impressed.
That's my job.
something about biting.
He bites the heads off
Well,
of
he
Peeps.
talked about discounted candy, so I said he could.
Peeps with their heads bitten off.
So that's
What's the other
I'll
thing?
buy that.
Percent off.
Hal, like, rivaling Ozzy himself, like, crazy train over here. So I think that we've agreed on a,
We're losing the town manager.
we are. So we've agreed on the regular budget. We're just waiting on a final number on the supplementary budget. I don't see us really moving anywhere else on the line items on this. And it puts us in a position to where we've got 2 to 3 years to crank down. We've got just to be on record, the police department's at their requested recommended budget.
Yes.
Fire department is at their requested recommended budget.
Good.
Minus 1 paramedic. Plus, well, that's capital, Kent. John, you're at your requested recommended budget, so police, fire, highway. So I think that it puts all of our department heads not in the greatest place, but at least in a good place, staffing their departments the way as best we can, considering the funding that we have. Capital's a completely different discussion, so I think that brings our talks on this to a close for the evening.
I think you need to entertain a motion.
I'll entertain any motion that you got.
I'll make one. I would like to make a motion that we enter into executive session for the purposes of litigation / real property, and then to leave executive session for the purpose of adjournment.
Second.
Made
I
by
think you have to
Ken?
come back out and announce your vote.
On,
We do?
oh, really?
If you take an action,
Tonight?
yeah.
All right, so
a
executive
little
session.
twist.
Yeah, who wants to do that one?
So there's no purpose of adjournment that's in there, but
All right, can I revisit that and stumble through this?
sure, do it.
I would like to go into executive session for the purposes of possible litigation in the real property, and then we will come back out of executive session
To announce our vote.
to announce the action that we took in executive session, if any.
If any.
I'll second that one as well.
Made by Tim, seconded by Dave. Roll call vote.
Mike Hughes, aye.
Tim Bone and I.
Kevin Morris, aye.
Dave Cortez, aye. We're back at 9:46 p.m.
Excellent. All right, Hal, would you like to do the honors of reading the outcome of executive session?
I think I would be pleased to do that. Pursuant to General Law, Chapter 79, the Board of Selectmen adopted an order of taking for the Sullivan property, so-called Sullivan property, consisting of 2 lots, which are more fully described in the order of taking presented to the meeting. Said taking having been authorized by vote of the November 14th, 2016 special town meeting approving Article 10, and damages of $1 are awarded.
And this was voted on unanimously.
Unanimously.
Okay. Do you have anything, Mr. Administrator, you done? I figured.
Not a peep.
Not a peep out of it.
Not a peep out of it.
Look at that.
I'll second that.
Made by Mike, seconded by Tim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Sarah.